The Sportback, Audi-speak for 5 doors. A configuration in which this A3 becomes very desirable indeed. Sure, for the same money you could consider buying a bigger car from a lesser brand, but after trying this one, Audi hopes that you won't want to. Brand loyalty. It's hard to put a price on it. Hard at least if you're a consumer. Audi, though, has no such qualms, confidently pitching this car, the A3 Sportback, as the priciest of all the compact family hatches that the Volkswagen Group sells. There's a reason for this, just as there's a reason why Audi brand loyalty will see a huge proportion of buyers for this car being customers satisfied with its predecessor. Explain to these people that the same technology could be theirs for several thousand less in a Skoda Octavia, and you'll be met with looks of puzzlement, wondering why such a fact could possibly be relevant. There might be some smug satisfaction, though, in their knowing that this car would cost hardly any more than an equivalent Volkswagen Golf. Though there was a 5-door version of the original Audi A3, a body style introduced to the range in 1996, the lineup only gained the Sportback tag in second generation form in 2004, when 5-door A3 motoring was repositioned for a slightly more mature, slightly more upmarket audience. This third generation A3 continues that trend. Audi's argument that this is more than just a 3-door A3 with a couple of extra doors, supported by this Sportback A3 variant's longer wheelbase. So you get more then for what you paid. More of what you want an A3 to be. Is it all enough? Let's find out. Despite the touch of extra weight, this Sportback A3 feels no different to drive than its 3-door counterpart, which means of course that it feels very good indeed. The MQB, or modular transverse matrix underpinnings, have been developed on a €1 billion budget to ensure class-leading standards of ride, handling and a whole lot more, which is pretty much how it turns out. First up, because a lot of the stuff you can't see is lighter than before, the car immediately feels more lithe and agile, even on a short journey. True, real driving enthusiasts will still prefer the rear-wheel drive reactions of a BMW 1 Series or the fine front-driven tactility of a Ford Focus, but everyone else will probably enjoy this Audi just as much, thanks to really nice technical touches like the way that an electronic limited slip differential has been built into the stability control system so that the car turns more sharply into corners, or the beautifully calibrated multi-link rear suspension that enables you to flow through the corners and soak up the bumps nonchalantly in a way that perfectly complements this Audi's quite exemplary standards of ride and refinement. Suspension, in fact, is something that's important to get right when specifying this car. Sportier trim levels come with lowered setups that personally I'd counsel you to avoid, something that's easier to do now that these trim levels can be ordered with standard springs. I'd do that if I were you. The standard suspension setup is fine, and in any case there are other ways to make this car feel more responsive that don't involve higher chiropractor's bills. If you're prepared to make an expensive tick on the options list, you could try Audi's advanced magnetic ride system with its clever magneto-rheological fluid filled dampers that enable you to switch the suspension feel to suit the road that you're on and the mood that you're in. Wise winter drivers will also consider the merits of a £1,500 investment in Quattro 4-wheel drive that will really pay dividends on icy or snowy roads. Many, though, may be quite happy simply fiddling with the neat Audi Drive Select vehicle dynamic system that via comfort, auto, dynamic, efficiency or individual modes enables you to adjust the steering weighting, the throttle response, and if the S-tronic dual clutch sequential automatic transmission has been fitted, the gearbox shift points to create precisely the feel that you're looking for. You'll find this auto box fitted to the 180 PS 1.8 litre TFSI petrol model, and it's a very clever transmission indeed, a dual clutch affair that's able to select the next gear before you've even left the last one. Most A3s though will come with the reasonably slick shifting manual 6-speeder that I've got here. The provision of auto transmission on the petrol 1.8 certainly doesn't seem to restrict its performance. Rest to 62 occupying a fleet 7.2 seconds on the way to a top speed of 144 miles an hour. For those needing more, the 300 PS S3 hot hatch beckons. Its turbocharged 2-litre TFSI petrol engine, making the rest to 62 mile an hour sprint in just 5.1 seconds. But these are minority choices. Almost all A3s in this country will be ordered with either a petrol 1.4 under the bonnet or one of the TDI diesels. Before talking TDI though, I want to point out that a hefty slug of diesel frugality can be achieved through Audi's COD or cylinder on demand technology. Now they fitted it to the pokier of the two 1.4 litre TFSI petrol models, that with 140 PS, and it's able to close down 2 of the 4 cylinders under low to medium engine speeds, with the result that nearly 60 miles to the gallon combined cycle frugality is possible, a figure that belies the spirited performance, and it's a combination that's pretty difficult to argue with. The lower powered of the two 1.4 litre TFSI petrol units has 122 PS and has none of this clever technicality, but still manages to stack up pretty well on the balance sheet, as does the 105 PS 1.2 litre TFSI entry-level petrol model that's possibly an even better alternative. As for the diesel derivatives that over 70% of British buyers will choose, well, there are 2 main ones. This 105 PS 1.6 litre TDI that manages rest to 62 in 10.7 seconds on the way to a top speed of 121 miles an hour, or the altogether more satisfying 150 PS 2 litre TDI that improves those figures to 8.6 seconds and 134 miles an hour. Should the 2-litre diesel's performance be insufficient for you, then you can talk to your dealer about specifying it in pokier 184 PS4. As was Audi's intention, this 5-door Sportback looks a little more mature and grown up than its 3-door counterpart. Now, as with that car, the detailing is beautifully done, with a 3rd rear side window added to a profile that emphasises these wide, powerful C-pillars. Initial impressions that this car, in looks at least, is little different to its predecessor, evaporate the closer you inspect the taut, pretty bodywork. It's all built around what Audi calls a tornado line that visually presses the car down onto the road and extends backwards. This a sharply drawn crease going from the wings through the doors and the side panels right to the tail lamps at the rear. More important though is what you can't see, the high-tech MQB modular transverse platform that underpins this car's ultra-lightweight construction that gives a weight saving of up to 80 kilograms. That's equivalent to losing the weight of a fully grown adult, with benefits you can readily imagine in terms of performance and efficiency. And all this despite the fact that this is a bigger car than its predecessor, or at least it is inside. The length, width and height of the car actually aren't that much different to the model that went before, but a 58mm wheelbase increase means that it'll feel usefully larger in the cabin. Something you notice most when you're trying to load the thing up with luggage. Now, for the first time with this 3rd generation A3, Audi has given the 5-door model a longer wheelbase than the 3-door. 35mm longer in actual fact, and that's mainly responsible for a luggage capacity that rises from 365 litres in the 3-door to 380 litres here. It's a flat load space with fully 100 centimetres between the wheel arches, so you may well find yourself being able to fit in more than you thought. It's certainly a very versatile cargo area with a neat loading floor that can be adjusted to suit the height of the items you have to carry. Extra functionality is promised by useful options like a load area organiser to separate your eggs from your iron brew, a ski hatch for longer items, and a reversible loading mat with a tougher side for boots and muddy dogs. Plus, of course, if you want more space, you can push forward the 60/40 split folding rear bench to free up, in this case, up to 1,220 litres. That's 120 litres more than would be possible in the 3-door. Position this loading floor correctly and it's a space that's almost flat. As for rear passenger space, well, that wheelbase increase means that this Sportback is certainly the A3 variant to choose if you're going to be regularly using the back seat. Even a 6-footer will be quite comfortable here, sat behind an equally lanky driver. As is usual with this class of car, though this rear bench can just about seat 3 adults, 2 will be much more comfortable. What's certainly not in doubt is that there's a little more space here, especially with regard to headroom, than there was before. What sets this car apart, though, isn't its practicality. No, it's the feeling that you get behind the wheel. Quite simply, nothing else at the £20,000 price point can match it. The cabin dominated by this 5.8-inch electrically extending colour screen. Now, via this, you can marshal the many controls of the redesigned MMI infotainment system that prevents all but the most vital functions from cluttering up the minimalist dashboard. Equally distinctive are these 4 air vents styled to resemble miniature jet engines and composed of no fewer than 30 different moving parts, including these metal bright outer rings that are shaped for perfect grip. Otherwise, you've got an interior that'll be familiar fare to anyone who speaks fluent Audi design language, with everything clear, classy and easily accessible. The dash is styled in a wing-like profile, and there's an electronic handbrake switch to replace the traditional and preferable handbrake lever, so as to free up space for the MMI infotainment system controller down here by your left hand. Ultimately, it's a cabin that wouldn't disgrace a car costing twice this price. And how many models of this sort can you say that about? Exactly. Expect to pay somewhere in the £20,000 to £25,000 bracket for most mainstream versions of this A3 Sportback. The 5-door version offered at a £620 premium over its 3-door counterpart. Now, this sees pricing pitched at very similar levels to that being asked for Audi's 2 closest rivals in this segment, the BMW 1 Series and the Mercedes A-Class. Choice between this trio will generally come down to personal preference, but the fact that you can get, say, a pokey A3 Sportback 2-litre TDI on the same fuel and tax terms as you'd need a feeble 1 Series or A-Class diesel to get will be a powerful incentive for A3 ownership. I could also point out that this car wouldn't cost you very much more than a comparable Volkswagen Golf with the same engines. Whichever A3 Sportback model you choose, 1.2, 1.4, 1.8 or 2-litre S3 petrol, or one of the diesels, this 1.6 or the 2-litre TDI, whichever of those you select, you should find your car to be decently equipped. Now that Audi has scrapped the previous generation version's poverty spec entry trim level, even the least expensive SE grade variants have a decent kit tally that runs to at least 16-inch alloy wheels, powered heated door mirrors, a driver information display with onboard computer, air conditioning, an electrically extendable, slimline colour infotainment display screen via which you can Bluetooth link in your mobile phone and fiddle with the controls for an 8-speaker CD stereo system that you can also operate via switches on the 4-spoke leather-trimmed multifunction steering wheel. You'll need the more expensive Sport and S-Line trims to give yourself a choice of suspension settings, sport seats, larger alloy wheels and the Drive Select system that enables you to play with the throttle response and the steering weighting. Satellite navigation is now an affordable option on an Audi. It'll cost you no more than around £500 to get it built into the MMI infotainment system. And beyond that, well, I'd also want to look at spending extra on the bi-xenon headlamps that can automatically dip themselves in the face of oncoming traffic at night. I'd also want to look at the interior lighting package that can make the cabin feel very special after dark. And maybe even the 14-speaker, 705-watt, 15-channel Bang & Olufsen sound system. Now, all of this is before you get to the particularly clever electronic connectivity options that really do set this car apart. The Audi Connect system lets you network with the internet and with other vehicles, and its central element is what Audi calls mobile phone preparation. Now with this, you can turn your A3 into a WLAN or wireless local area network hotspot so that you can surf the internet or email with up to 8 mobile devices. Add in the so-called MMI High option and you really do then get a taste of motoring in the 21st century. This pairs familiar services such as Google Maps, Google Street View, Audi traffic information online and the Audi music stream system that'll enable you to tune into radio stations all around the world with much more. Namely, picture book navigation, which enables you to store in pictures of places you'll be passing through on your route. Then there's access to social media services like Facebook and Twitter. Text-to-speak messaging, access to your emails, and everything from the latest news to fuel, flight and train information, plus a What's On guide to towns you'll be passing through. Safety-wise, a 5-star Euro NCAP showing is justified by the usual twin front, side and curtain airbags, plus a driver's knee bag, as well as Isofix child seat fastenings, an active bonnet to reduce pedestrian injuries, ESP stability control and adaptive brake lights that flash during emergency stops to warn following motorists. There's also rest recommendation technology that assesses your driving style in the first few minutes of each journey and then will provide audible and visual signals if it feels that you're losing attentiveness, prompting you to stop for a restorative coffee. Beyond that, there is of course plenty of optional safety technology. I particularly like the ACC adaptive cruise control system that works at up to 124 miles an hour and can brake the car right back down to a standstill before pulling it away again if necessary. Now, you can build into this setup the even cleverer Presense front system that works via a radar mounted in the top of the windscreen that constantly scans the road ahead for potential collision hazards. If one is detected, the driver will be alerted, and if you're travelling at below 90 miles an hour, the car can even automatically brake itself to avoid the hazard. The Presense technology is also available in a more basic guise that will pre-tension the seatbelts and automatically close both the windows and, if fitted, the power sunroof if the ESP stability control system indicates that the car is about to skid. There's also a clever traffic sign recognition system that's able to picture speed signs as you pass and display them on the dash, and the Audi Park Assist setup, which can automatically steer you into the tighter spaces. There's also Audi Side Assist that will stop you dangerously pulling out to overtake when there's a vehicle in your blind spot, and Audi Active Lane Assist to stop dozy drivers from veering out of their lanes on the highway. Though this Sportback A3 weighs 35 kilograms more than its three-door counterpart, it still manages to be one of the lightest cars in its class. Weight saving, of course, has all kinds of automotive advantages, and enhancements like the use of aluminium for the front wings and bonnet mean that reductions of up to 90 kilograms over the previous generation model have been achieved. Now, all of that means that, say, an A3 Sportback 1.4 TFSI weighs just 1,205 kilograms. To put that in perspective, that's not much more than a Volkswagen Polo from the next Super Mini class down, and it's 160 kilograms less than equivalent rival versions of the BMW 1 Series or the Mercedes A-Class. As you can imagine, this creates big benefits when it comes to cost of ownership, with savings that are most impressive in the e-tron plug-in hybrid model that Audi has developed. But even in conventionally engined A3 derivatives, the savings are impressive at around 10% over the previous generation model when it comes to CO2 and fuel consumption figures. It's probably best to illustrate what I mean with an example. The best-selling UK A3 Sportback variant will probably be the 150 PS 2-litre TDI diesel, which manages 106 grams per kilometre of CO2 and a combined cycle fuel reading of 68.9 miles to the gallon, giving a theoretical operating range of 740 miles. Now, to match that in a comparable Mercedes A-Class or BMW 1 Series, you'd need a much lower powered diesel engine. Opt for the lesser diesel A3 Sportback that I've got here, the 1.6 TDI, and of course you can expect to do even better, 74.3 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 99 grams per kilometre of CO2. But its advantage over the pokier 2-litre diesel is so comparatively slight that most potential owners will probably go for the sportier model. Don't decide on diesel though without checking out the clever petrol-powered 140 PS 1.4 litre TFSI COD variant. COD standing for Cylinder on Demand technology, able to cut out 2 of the 4 cylinders on low to medium engine speeds, leading to an impressive combined cycle fuel economy figure of 57.7 miles to the gallon. That's nearly diesel frugality, yet running on cheaper green pump fuel. Mind you, the standard 122 PS 1.4 litre TFSI petrol model doesn't do too badly, managing 54.3 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and putting out 120 grams per kilometre of CO2. Figures you can improve to 57.6 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 114 grams per kilometre of CO2 by opting for the entry-level 1.2 litre TFSI petrol variant. All well and good, but you might think that saddling this A3 with an automatic gearbox or a powerful turbocharged petrol engine would put paid to efficient fuel returns. Not so. Take the 1.8 litre TFSI petrol model with its efficient 7-speed S-tronic automatic gearbox that manages, 50.4 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and puts out 130 grams per kilometre of CO2. Or the powerful turbocharged S3 Sportback that, despite its 5-second rest to 62 mile an hour performance, still manages 40.9 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 159 grams per kilometre of CO2. So, how has Audi done it? Well, it's not all down to the weight-saving programme. There's a start-stop system, for example, that cuts the engine when you don't need it, stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. And a host of other little detail touches, like brake energy recuperation that recycles energy that would otherwise be lost under braking or cruising. Then there's a climate control system that can be used in highly efficient eco mode. And the efficiency setting on the Drive Select Vehicle Dynamics system. There's also an efficiency program on the onboard computer that gives you fuel-saving tips, and a gear shift indicator. There are even little spoilers positioned in front of the front wheels to better guide the airflow. Now, the result of all of these details, Audi reckons, is that over the typical lifetime of an A3, you'd save around 2 metric tonnes in greenhouse gas emissions. It's also worth pointing out that at the end of its life, over 95% of this car can be recycled. As for depreciation and pence per mile running costs, well, independent specialists Cap Monitor reckon that for mainstream A3 Sportback variants, these will be class leading, a fraction ahead of BMW and Mercedes, and far ahead of premium compact class wannabes like Volvo's V40 and Alfa Romeo's Giulietta. Buy, for example, an A3 Sportback 2-litre TDI diesel now, and 3 years down the line it will still be worth 46% of what you paid for it. That's what makes it worth paying the extra for this car over, say, a well-equipped Focus or Astra, both of which have closed the perceived quality gap in recent years. As long as you can afford this Audi's initial outlay and don't go mad on the options list, then an A3 is going to work out cheaper to run over a full lifespan cycle. Further assistance here is provided by a fixed price maintenance plan that can cover you for between 3 and 5 years, and an affordable set of 1 to 50 insurance groupings that see a base 1.4 litre TFSI model rated at 16E, a base 2 litre TDI rated at Group 21E, and a 1.8 litre TFSI at 24E. The Audi A3 was the model that invented the premium compact sector way back in 1996, and since then the vast majority of cars sold in this segment have had 5 doors. Important then that this vital Ingolstadt model should be at its most desirable in this form. It is. Indeed, why wouldn't you, is the phrase that most comes to mind in consideration of this car. After all, an A3 isn't cheap, and you'll get so much more out of it in Sportback form. It helps, of course, that for the first time, Audi has given this model the extra wheelbase and therefore the extra length and space really needed to suit its price tag, market positioning and intended use. It's all just enough to make this more versatile body style a usefully more practical proposition than its 3-door stablemate. Like the 3-door variant, it's light in bulk, heavy in technology, and as at home in Belgravia as it is in Brixton. And like that model, the interior is where this design really strides apart. You could be in a luxury car. You certainly wouldn't think you were in a run-of-the-mill Focus class family hatchback. For not a lot more than you pay for one of those, this car brings a touch of class to the compact sector, which of course is why so many people want one.